मेरा परिचय सुनने के बाद आपको लगा होगा कि मेरी उम्र कम से कम 60-70 साल की होगी. But for the knowledge of the audience, I'm lucky to be 48 and have done so much. And that is why it is quite startling that an institution that is celebrating 30 years calls a 48-year-old. Ladies and gentlemen, वैसे तो नेता को अगर आप किसी माइक्रोफोन के सामने रख दें तो भाषण कब ख़त्म होगा इसकी कोई गारंटी नहीं है. लेकिन आज मैंने गोएंका परिवार से हिंदी बोलूं चलेगा, वरना नॉर्मली ऐसे मंचों पर जब तक अच्छी अंग्रेज़ी ना बोलो तब तक लोगों को नहीं लगता कि आप एक इंटेलेक्चुअल हैं. वैसे तो गोएंका परिवार ने अपेक्षा की है कि मैं यहाँ आकर आपके साथ संवाद करूं, एक छोटा सा भाषण दूं, लेकिन एक हिमाकत आप सबकी अनुमति से करना चाहती हूँ. आई हैव टू आस्क अ क्वेश्चन. हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू आर प्रिंसिपल्स एंड टीचर्स? नॉट बैड. एंड हाउ मेनी आर ओनर्स? नॉट बैड. देयर आर सम हु पिक्ड अप द हैंड्स बोथ फॉर ओनर एंड प्रिंसिपल, which is very exciting because I am the daughter of an English teacher. I will go back and tell my mom if she had only been a principal, she could one day be an owner of a school. How many of you have heard the story of David and Goliath? Some people pronounce it as Goliath. How many of you have heard of it? I'm asking you to raise your hand for a specific reason. And you're all audible without a microphone. So if anybody can get up and tell me what the story is. Anybody? Especially if it's an owner. One owner and one principal. जिसने हाथ उठाया था, किसने हाथ उठाया था? हाँ मैडम, आप ओनर हैं, प्रिंसिपल हैं? हाँ मतलब दोनों हैं? तो वाइस प्रिंसिपल हैं? अच्छा, मैंने वो पूछा ही नहीं. वाइस प्रिंसिपल कितने हैं यहाँ पे? तो मुझे ये बताएं, डेविड और गुलायत की जो आपने कहानी सुनी वो सबको थोड़ा सा सुना दीजिए. डेविड एंड गुलायत क्या है? सुनाई दे रहा है सबको? अगर नहीं सुनाई दे रहा तो माइक उन तक पहुंचाइए. कहाँ से हैं?
छोटे से बच्चे थे और जो गलियात थे वो बहुत बड़े बिग जैंट थे. तो उनके साथ लड़ने के लिए कोई भी हिम्मत नहीं करता था और उनके साथ लड़ने के लिए कोई भी नहीं जा पाता था. तो वहाँ पर एक युद्ध जैसे होना था तो कोई भी सामने नहीं आ पा रहा था. तो गोलियत ने सबको डर किया कि वो आकर उसको मारे. तो
यहाँ पे भारती जी ना ऐसे करके बैठी हैं कि हे भगवान, ये थोड़ी गड़बड़ होगी है कहानी.
तो डेविड ने क्या किया? डेविड ने
थोड़ी सी तो गड़बड़ होगी है कहानी. बाय द वे, मैं जम्मू वालों को अच्छे से जानती. चिन्नौर कितना दूर है रूपनगर से? आसपास ही है ना? हाँ, शॉर्टकट में ही गड़बड़ हो रही है.
तो उसमें जैसे डेविड सामने आए तो उन्होंने डेविड ने अपने स्टोन से गोलियत को हिट किया.
अच्छा, कितने साल पुरानी कहानी है? बहुत. तो मेरे को भी पता है कितने साल पुरानी है.
मैम, इट्स फ्रॉम द ओल्ड टेस्टामेंट.
मैम, ये आउट ऑफ क्वेश्चन. वो ये सप्लीमेंट्री लिखने के लिए टीचिंग होती है ना, ये वो हो रही है ना. आपने नहीं बोलना. हाँ, आई नो. शी कांट हेल्प. यस. अच्छा, जम्मू वाले छोड़ के किसी और को कहानी पता है? अब कोई कॉन्फिडेंटली हाथ नहीं उठा रहा. कुछ लोगों के चेहरे पे, जो फ्रंट रो पे जितने 5 पुरुष बैठे हैं, उनके चेहरे पे ये है कि हे भगवान, हम क्लास लेते हैं, हमारी क्लास ले रही हैं. बोलो जी. वेयर आर यू फ्रॉम? गुड़गांव. बोलो. सेक्टर तो चंडीगढ़ में भी है. हाँ.
डेविड वाज अ यंग बॉय. उसको चुना गया था कि वो अपने पेबल से गोलियत को मारे. इसका मोरल ऑफ द स्टोरी यही था कि अगर भगवान साथ होते हैं तो कुछ भी पॉसिबल नहीं है.
अच्छा, ये मॉरल है. Okay. Anybody else?
Assumption was, excuse me, ma'am.
Who has? It is a typical man. He is speaking without permission. Sit down, sir. ना यहाँ पे भाई साहब इनको माइक दो. हाँ हाँ भाई साहब. देखिए आदमी को परमिशन दी जाए तो कितना घबरा के बोलता है. जी.
So, David was.
परिचय दे दीजिए सर.
I'm Varun. I'm part of the GD Goenka group actually. I'm the chief.
Doesn't matter.
I'm the chief HR officer.
हाँ, this is the problem with HR. HR is always king ना, so they think अरे मैं वरुण हूँ, सब जानते होंगे. आप मेरी पे स्लिप साइन नहीं करते, इसलिए पूरा नाम बताइए.
Varun Reddy.
हाँ, congratulations. हाँ, बताइए.
So, David was a shepherd boy. And when the finish times, as far as I remember the story.
वरुण ने TEDx टॉक देखी है. मैं बता रही हूँ कौन सी वाली देखी है.
So, Goliath.
मैल्कम ग्लैडवेल वाली देखी थी. हाँ, बोलो बोलो.
Malcolm Gladwell वाली देखी है मैम, but वो उसका interpretation गलत है.
अच्छा, यही HR का प्रॉब्लम है. हाँ.
So,
How is it wrong?
I don't remember it right now, but when I see.
This is HR. हाँ.
No. So,
Sit, Mr. Reddy.
so David actually.
HR doesn't listen. Thank you, Varun. Sit. It'll be interesting for everybody to note. I have given one title, David and Goliath. I come here today not only as somebody who's had experience in formulating policy in education. I've been in the social sector for 2 decades, in fact 2.5 decades. I've been in an economic ministry. I created the Gender Alliance at the World Economic Forum. If all of you know CII, which is close to 4 lakh industries in the country and their association, the first ever gender secretariat in CII was created by me. I funded it, created it, and today it's working for the cause of gender across the country and also in spaces such as G20, BIMSTEC, BRICS. Now the reason why I demonstrated this conversation this morning, जिसने मोबाइल पे रिकॉर्डिंग करनी है, सारी रिकॉर्डिंग भाई साहब बैठ जाओ. Do you know why I demonstrated this today? Because it's not a part of any chapter anywhere. The 2-3 people who spoke today spoke from recollection, what they had heard. And this is what recalled us to you through life as adults. You remember bits and pieces. You don't remember the whole. But as people who are serving the education sector, especially in school and higher education, your biggest challenge is not how many students pass, but how many students remember what they were taught. Many principals in the field of education today talk about cognitive skills. How many of you have heard of cognitive skills in your training? Almost everybody? What is the difference between cognition and learning? Have you ever learnt that? When you talk about learning, learning means आपको कुछ आता है, आपने कुछ नया सीखा, and that becomes new knowledge. Cognition is how do you perceive information? How do you remember information? How is your language affected by information? How do you reflect on that information? And how do you present that information? Today I had 3 people standing up, and if I was in the segment of psychology or psychiatry, I could tell you exactly the kind of people they are. Because of how they perceived one story that they must have heard as children, or they must have learned as children, and how it affects their presentation, their memory, and their language. If you notice, and I don't remember how many of you will notice, the lady on stage, madam, either sit on stage and don't move about because you are distracting people's attention. Now the issue is this. Who in this room remembers how did these three people pronounce the word Goliath? The English teacher. That's because it's her job. But then when you look at a school management system, who are the other people who have to be cognitively aligned to the English teacher? Every principal, vice principal. I have no such expectation from owners. So the only two people who are cringing in this room is the English teacher and Bharti ji. So let me tell you the real story of David and Goliath, which Mr. Reddy said, I don't believe it, but it's evidenced in a 1960 medical journal. So somebody gets up and disowns a part of recorded medical history, which means that not everything you teach will be taken at the value of what is being taught. It will be challenged, and you as teachers, as educators, have to evidence it. Now he's partially right when I asked him the source of his information, which means as an educator, and when you say educator, it need not mean that you're a teacher, a principal, or a vice teacher, or a vice principal, because whoever can get you new knowledge is an educator. So let me take you back 3,000 years ago. The Israeli army and the Philistine army were at loggerheads for 2 weeks. The Philistines came from the sea, and the army was that of King Saul, which came from the mountains and came down to the plain. And the army was watching each other eye to eye because the army was of the same size. And they wondered, how can we avoid mass killing? So they decided that there will be one fighter each from each army who will go to battle, and whichever warrior wins, that will be declared as the victory for the army that warrior belongs to. Now imagine this, when you heard the description from 3 people, you did not hear this description at all. You heard one boy, one giant, and not this description. So when the Philistine army said, we will send our greatest warrior, yes, he was 7 feet tall, and he reached the middle of the battlefield and he said, let anybody come and fight me. Nobody came forward from the Israeli army, except one shepherd boy. And that shepherd boy went up to the king and said, I volunteer, let me go. The king did not believe that this boy had the capacity to fight a giant who was wearing a huge armor, who had a huge sword. So the king decided, let me give this shepherd boy an armor. The shepherd boy said, no, don't. He said, let me give you a sword. He said, don't. The shepherd boy says, I will go. He was a slingshotter. Now, what is the biggest misconception about slingshots? जिन्होंने ये कहानी जम्मू से बताई, उन्होंने कहा गुलेल लेकर गया लड़का. उस गुलेल की खासियत ये थी कि आज से 3000 पहले जब वॉरफेयर होती थी, एनीबडी फ्रॉम द आर्म फोर्सेस हियर, एक्स पर्सनल, wives? Okay. So when you had 7 revolution of a slingshot, the impact is that of a .45 caliber handgun. The military was divided in 3 parts. Those who went on horse, those who went on foot, and those were also accompanied by people who could take the slingshot. It was made of leather. So this boy says, I will go fight. He goes to the middle. He takes the slingshot. 7 revolution, hits Goliath right in the middle of the head. Goliath falls. So does the sword. He goes and chops off Goliath's head with the sword. Now there was in 1960s a medical study done on this story. Your entire system is positioned in such a fashion that you teach children through stories. How do you create medical evidence of miracles? So the study found that the rock that the boy picked up, that valley is filled with elements, boulders, small rocks, which are made of barium sulfate. Any chemist in the room? What happens when an ordinary rock becomes barium sulfate? Any biologist in the room? Medical personnel in the room? In the 1960s, this medical journal found that how does a man get to be 7 feet tall and not have a medical problem? They say that there has to be a tumor near the pituitary gland which makes you partially blind. And they went back to the biblical story to check that yes, the giant says, come to me, which means he could not see. The giant had to be held to the center of the battlefield, which means he may look big, but he was not agile, he was in fact weak. Which means when we teach stories, do we teach reasoning with a story? And that is what cognition is. That you may learn something as a child, but as an adult, have you inspired that child to revisit that story and try and find a new aspect of that story? So when I told the HR gentleman, did you watch Malcolm Gladwell's TED Talk? He said, no, I don't believe in it. But what is it that you do when you say, I don't believe in it? You rubbish somebody who's had a legacy as an intellectual, as a thinker, as a cognitive thinker that too, and who evidences their position. Which means, what do you teach students? You teach students to reflect on not only evidence, but also respect people for their legacies and for having a different point of view. You may not accept their point of view as the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but it is their truth. I'm here today not because I know the Goenka family. My relationship and association with that family goes back now close to a decade. I'm here today because they gave me an opportunity to speak to the leaders of 120 schools. From your schools comes the future of our country. And if that future is not able to reflect, to memorize, to articulate, then the demographic dividend we talk about will turn into a demographic nightmare. You will have many people come to the confluence and tell you how you should churn out good human beings. I know that the Goenka family talks about what should be a Goenkan. But many of us know that in our country, how many families send children to such celebrated, branded schools only because they want their children to have a better life. It is about that name on the certificate which gives them social respectability. We know that parents are not looking at how they churn up culturally or from a value-based education system every day. They go to work so that they can afford a fee. It's a vicious cycle. And it's the men and women in this room that can break that vicious cycle, that can show that yes, you can have efficient management you can have great teaching, you can have a cost balance between how much fees can you bring and how much teacher salary can you afford. But what you can never get in a pamphlet is passion for why you do it. And I'm here today to plead to you that in your sustained passion to engage lies the sustenance of a generation that can either make or break our country. Gandhiji has said many things, but one of the most prolific things he ever said was, learn as if you will live forever and live as if you will die tomorrow. I don't know how many of us abide by it, how many of us even know it. What I demonstrated today is a story which has nothing to do with us culturally. It was 3,000 years ago in Israel. But when we are trying to be global citizens, can we live in a cocoon and not know of the multi-dimensional prospects of global cultures? So you are a part of an ecosystem which is trying to fill the gap of all the challenges that has been seen in the education sector. For everything, if it was perfect, we would be a part of a utopian state. Every country has its challenges. What you should aspire for is, yes, our country has challenges, but the GD Goenka school institution is the solution. Is that your aspiration? That you're not a part of the problem, you're a part of the solution. So when I looked at the English teacher and she very gingerly got her hand up and she said, yes, the pronunciation was all wrong. I reflect on my English teacher, Mrs. Rose. And I look back, a lot of your children, and I say, I got this habit of saying, your children are children. And I was often asked as a politician, why do you say that? I said, because it's very different when you look at them from a third eye and think of them as only vote banks. Or look at them as only, okay, as an owner sometimes presumes, ठीक है, ये batch कितना? The issue is the minute you start looking at them as our children, many things change. Because for our children, there are no shortcuts. For our children, you want the best of teaching and teachers. And the best of teaching and teachers cannot come when you say, nahi, itna hi denge. So you walk a tightrope between efficacy, cost, and passion. And that is why my congratulations to the team at GD Goenka for calling this a confluence and not a conference. Because a conference is very, very dispassionate. A confluence is an indication that what you seek to serve is genuinely our children. So in the back room we were talking, kaun kya baat karega? A little gossip for all of you. And the lady here said that we should talk about how we make children better citizens. And I said, you know what? Make Kiran Bedi talk about it. And why? No politician ever leaves an opportunity. But if I want somebody to espouse the cause of good citizens, why did I say, make Kiran Bedi talk about it? Because as a young girl, at the age of 15, I said, I want to be a cop. I want to be Kiran Bedi. And my father said, you don't have her discipline. You won't take any orders from netas. I said, okay, I'll become a neta then. But the issue is, GD Goenka Confluence gives you that opportunity to collaborate and share opportunities. That even the guests that they have invited do not say, "Ye sab main karungi." And she had a session with Dr. Bedi last night. And it seems Dr. Bedi said, "Smriti ye bolegi, aisa hi hoga." Can you imagine, as a child, a person you look up to, who's a legend, knows your mind because you worked with her, that as minister, I have her walk into my office. Ministers never stand for other people in the room. I stood. Why? Because my ambition had walked through that door. And who do IAS, IPS, politicians stand for? They stand for no one else. They bow before no one else but their teachers. And that is the power you have. So my congratulations. I hope that the next 30 years give us many more opportunities to serve the children of our country and build a better society. Heartiest congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. And as a parent now of grown-up kids, but as a daughter of an English teacher, thank you for your service. Yes. Whoever has any questions can feel free to ask. वो ना करो, वो लगेगा rigged है. Rigged तो नहीं है? पक्का? पढ़ा तो नहीं आपने क्या question है? So anybody apart from those questions can go, but whoever that question belongs to can possibly stand up. Hanji, you
Ma'am,
can read out
I
the
have a
name of the
question from Dr. Prerna, GDG Lucknow.
Anyone here by that name?
Dr. Prerna, if you could raise your hand. Yes, can I read out your question? May I?
Prerna ji, what's your question?
Yes.
Question is that just a simple thing when we talk about integrating the vocational skills. We all know that competency is a combination of knowledge, skill and attitude. So when we see the children, when we see the stakeholders in the school scenario, we are preparing the children for tomorrow. That is the objective. When we talk about the subject of studies, our child is the center node wherein we are all revolving around and we are doing everything wherein we
What's the
are
question? You have to be succinct.
Yes. So question is that how can it be percolated in the maximum schools?
You have to teach them how to visualize the tomorrow. You can see the tomorrow, the others can't. So for percolation, you have to create acceptance. And for that acceptance to be created, you have to make them imagine that tomorrow. And when they find themselves at the center of that tomorrow, then I think your desire to transfer that skill set can get accelerated because you've created an acceptance for it. Right now, they think you have picked it. The skill that has to be transmitted and the tomorrow where you see them. It has to be a personal journey. It takes a little bit of talking, but if you do that, then you will have 100% success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
ma'am. Ma'am, may I pick out another
Yes.
question? I have a question. How do you reconcile moments when you have to make decisions or take actions that go against your personal beliefs?
Who's asked this question?
This is a question about you being a leader.
No. Who's asked this question? Is it nameless?
No, ma'am. This is from Morena.
Hello. It's a very deadly question. There's always a consequence to conscience. Can you bear the consequences? Then do what is right.
Thank you, ma'am. Following our conscience is what we endorse for all our students.
Yeah, but it's a costly affair. Huh. Anyone else? Anything else on the
board?
board?
Questions at the audience, please.
Yes, sir. आप परिचय दे दें अगर अपना. ओ, मेरे दादे का है, मुरादाबाद से मेरे दादाजी हैं. हाँ बोलिए जी, आप तो मायके वाले हैं. हाँ बोलिए.
So now my question is कि हम इंडिया में ब्रेन ड्रेन को कैसे रोक सकते हैं?
आपके हिसाब से ब्रेन ड्रेन है क्या साहब?
सर मैम ब्रेन ड्रेन जो मैं समझता हूँ वो ये है कि मैं क्राइस्ट यूनिवर्सिटी से पढ़ रहा हूँ बैंगलोर से, और मेरे साथ के जितने दोस्त हैं और साथ में मेरे कुछ दोस्त हैं जो कि IIT और IIMs हैं, उन लोगों के जो बैचमेट्स थे उनमें से शायद आज की डेट में इंडिया के अंदर 30
आपका नाम वैद्य है?
सारंग।
सारंग ना? सारंग बात बताइए, जितने लोग बाहर हैं वो क्या हिंदुस्तान से कम प्यार करते हैं? जो आपके बैचमेट्स, हाँ नहीं नहीं, सो अभी एक एक चीज़ पूछ रहे हो, क्या वो आपके देश से कम प्यार करते हैं? अपने देश से नहीं ना. अगर अपने देश से, अपने गांव से, अपने प्रदेश से, अपने किसी बैचमेट से मदद की गुहार आए, क्या वो करेंगे? तो वो हिंदुस्तानी अगर वहाँ भी है तो क्या फ़र्क पड़ता है जब तक उसका दिल हिंदुस्तानी और कर्म हिंदुस्तान के लिए. You see, you are not living in a myopic world anymore. You're a part of a globalization and network ecosystem. This question about brain drain is a question that emanated in the 80s, in the 70s. Today, it is not as if people do not have options to actualize their talent right here in India. But you're a part of a democracy which gives people the right to live their lives their way. The issue is this democracy serves at least 300 million children, at least 80% of them who cannot afford an education get educated in the government systems. But they do not become the bonded labor of that system. So whoever envisaged this terminology, brain drain, did it in a decade where there was no technological medium to stay connected. And that is why I find that phrase in itself today dichotomous. And I can evidence that, Sarang. When I was Minister Education, we began a program called Gyan, where I appealed to all Indians overseas in academic institutions to come and teach in Indian schools which are of the government nature and Indian colleges. You know how many people turned up? 2,200. So if they go overseas and get a globalized experience and come back and serve their country, there is nothing wrong with it. Do not shame them, in fact celebrate them, especially when they want to contribute.
Thank you.
हाँ जी सर, अब आप परमिशन मांग रहे हो? यस सर. हाँ प्लीज सर.
नमस्कार, अनमोल चित्रा, GD गोयनका का छोटा सा शिक्षक हूँ. Just wanted to.
कहाँ साहब?
गोला. Just wanted to paraphrase the story which you narrated beautifully today.
जी सर.
In the current scenario, I have not heard about the David and Goliath, but I heard about Article 370 and Narendra. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being the only politician in the room. Yes. Yes sir. Ma'am, after that I'll. Namaste.
I am partner with GD Goenka in the group.
जी सर.
एक चैलेंज आता है, उसका सोल्यूशन बताइए कि हमारे पास जो पैशन है, हमारा जो विजन है, बेटर इंडिया, उसको इम्प्लीमेंट करने के लिए हम अपनी टीम को कैसे इंस्पायर करें, पूरी टीम, क्योंकि सारी इंडिया बराबर नहीं है. हम पूरी टीम को
टीम से पूछिए उनकी इंडिया की परिभाषा क्या है.
एक्सेप्ट अदर देन दी सारी हम कैसे.
मैं वही कह रही हूँ साहब, टीम से पूछिए भारत की उनकी परिभाषा क्या है, और फिर दूसरा प्रश्न पूछिए सेवा की उनकी परिभाषा क्या है. कुछ लोग बहुत बड़ी मेहरबानी करते हैं कि पान खाते हैं और दीवारों पे नहीं थूकते. मैं कहती हूँ बड़ी कृपा है साहब. हाँ हाँ, कुछ लोग होते हैं जो इंतज़ार करते हैं कि अगर ट्रैफिक पुलिस वाला है तो सिग्नल नहीं तोड़ेंगे, नहीं है तो तोड़ देंगे, कैमरा नहीं है तो बिल्कुल ही तोड़ देंगे. सो आस्क पीपल व्हाट देयर कंट्री मीन्स टू देम and ask people what service means to them, and then personalize the passion towards it. Because you cannot have a one size fits all patriotism. I'll give you a very small example. There is the Indian national flag on a lamp post when I came into the campus. Anybody who knows the flag code will know that the Indian national flag cannot be on a lamp post flying lower than other flags. But that is me. Nobody must have considered it because for them it's the Indian national flag. And they'll say मैं कहीं भी flag hoist करूँ या कहीं भी flag का emblem डालूँ. So that's what I'm saying. My passion towards my country may be different from yours. And if you are heading an assimilated group of teachers, administrators, then you have to tell them, tell me what your country means to you, tell me what the word service means to you, and then tell me how will you showcase your service within this institution. Yes.
मेरा नाम तारकेश्वरी मिश्रा है और मैं GD गोएंका confluence से।
उसमें कौन सा सेक्टर है?
ये सेक्टर 10।
हाँ.
मैम मैं ये आपसे क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहती हूँ कि बच्चे आज जो नंबर के बोझ के तले दबे हुए हैं उनको उससे कैसे निकाला जाए?
पेरेंट्स को निकालो, बच्चे निकल जाएंगे अपने आप.
सकारात्मक सोच बच्चों में कैसे?
तारकेश्वरी जी देखिए, हमारे लिए कहना बड़ा आसान है पेरेंट्स को निकालो. पेरेंट देख रहा है वैल्यू फॉर मनी और वो रिजल्ट को उस वैल्यू की दृष्टि से देख रहा है. जब आप अफोर्ड नहीं कर सकते तब आपकी एक ही मंशा रहती है कि कम से कम मेरे बच्चे की हालत ना हो कि वो अपनी ज़िंदगी अफोर्डेबिलिटी की दृष्टिकोण से जिए. तो दिस इज़ एन एंगेजमेंट विद द पेरेंट. द बर्डन मे बी दैट ऑफ द चाइल्ड, बट वी हैव टू बी humane enough to consider this also a burden for the parent, because the parent is the largest set of social norms. You can't tell a parent ठीक है अच्छे से पढ़ा नहीं है, 1 साल स्किप कर देते हैं, अरे बाप रे उसको वहीं हार्ट अटैक हो जाना है. So you have to, as teachers, while you are concentrated on making joyful experiences available to your students, it has to be an equal joy for a parent to engage with you. It's a big ask of teachers and administrators, and that's why so many institutions keep saying please pay them well, because काम सिर्फ कॉपी और मार्कशीट ठीक करने का नहीं है, लेसन सुनाने का नहीं है. It's building of a life. Thank you. हाँ जी. Anyone else that side? Yes, I'll just come. Yes, ma'am. Namaste.
भिवानी हरियाणा मैम आईडी में टोलर हाउस, तो उसमें पूछा मैंने एक रिपोर्ट कार्ड में एक छोटा सा जगह होती है जिसमें लिखा होता है कि व्हाट दे वांट टू बिकम. तो जनरली हम पूछते हैं बच्चों का बहुत लिमिटेड साइंस होता है, या तो डॉक्टर, इंजीनियर या पुलिस ऑफिसर. तो आपकी कार्यकाल के दौरान जब आप शिक्षा मंत्री थी, क्या कुछ ऐसा इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया जिसमें कि लाइफ स्किल्स को प्रमोट किया जाए या बच्चों को ऐसा कुछ मतलब करियर को प्रमोट करने?
मैम हम लोग ना हमेशा देखते हैं कि नेता कैसे बच्चा बदलेगा. अगर आप मेरी रिपोर्ट कार्ड का बोलें तो मेरी पूरी 1 साल की मेहनत वो टीचर के रिमार्क पे केंद्रित रहती थी कि मेरी टीचर ने मेरे बारे में क्या लिखा उस रिपोर्ट कार्ड में, वो ज़िंदगी भर की मेमोरी थी. अब फोकस उस टीचर के रिमार्क से बाहर निकल के बच्चे के रिमार्क पे आ गया है. इशू ये है, आपने कहा कि बच्चे से हम पूछते हैं तुम्हारे ऑप्शंस बताओ. हम कभी बच्चे से ये कहते हैं कि ऑप्शंस ढूंढने में, कंक्लूड अपॉन करने में वक्त लगता है, इट्स ओके, कभी नहीं बोलते. तो जो बर्डन की बात कर रहे हैं वो हम ही मैनिफेस्ट करते हैं कि जल्दी ऑप्शन बताओ. तो हम कौन सी उम्र से बच्चे से ऑप्शन मांगना शुरू कर रहे हैं? क्या बनना है, क्या बनना है, क्या बनना है?
मैम अप टू 12th क्लास में मेरे को ऐसा लगता है कि कुछ कमी है हमारे करिकुलम में कि बच्चों को मतलब उस तरह करियर की मतलब ऑप्शन से वो लोग नहीं सोच पाते.
मेरा ये सबका अलग अलग अपना.
ऐसा होना चाहिए कि जिसमें मतलब
मैम देखिए ऐसा है हम एक अजीबोगरीब पड़ाव पे अपने समाज में, और ये विश्व भर में चर्चा है. पहले कहते थे कि भैया बच्चा रेस भाग रहा है, नंबर 1 2 3 को गोल्ड मेडल मिलेगा। अब हम चाहते हैं कि अपने बच्चों को कहें भाई सबको सर्टिफिकेट मिलेगा, बच्चे का प्रेशर कम हो। प्रॉब्लम बड़ों के साथ है, बच्चे के साथ नहीं है। आप अगर बच्चे को आज कहें कि भाई compete मत करो, कल की देखी जाएगी, वो भी ठीक नहीं है। And you're the only person who can create that balance. That yes, there's a value to participate, but there's also a value to compete. Because वो बच्चा जब आपके कोकून से बाहर जाके दुनिया में जाएगा, उसको सडनली लगेगा अरे मुझे किसी ने कंपटीशन नहीं सिखाया। तो while you can tell the child that तुम्हें जो बनना है तुम बनो और मुझे बताओ how can I help you, at the same time you have to have a conversation with the parent and the child to say you are living in a world which is competitive. So how do you prepare for both competition and collaboration? That is a message only you can infuse.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Last question of the session.
हाँ, फिर दूसरे गेस्ट को भी आना है। हाँ हाँ, after that lady we'll take that lady as well, so that both of them would pick up. हाँ जी,
from GD Goenka Confluence, Irani.
which sector ma'am?
Very simple question, ma'am.
सेक्टर नहीं बताया आपने?
Sorry?
सेक्टर नहीं बताया?
This is
मैं रह चुकी हूँ इसलिए मुझे पता है। B10 है, A ब्लॉक है,
Sector
C ब्लॉक है।
B7 and 8.
secretary.
हाँ ठीक है।
So, you're the daughter of a teacher.
Yes.
Did it ever inspire you to become a teacher?
No. Because teaching is a hard job.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of patience.
Yes. But as a child, you didn't know that. I mean, you must
No, I saw it.
Very hard. But
I saw it.
okay.
It is a life of sacrifice. There's no glory. The glory is for the child.
Ma'am, if I may,
The last question there.
we got wonderful certificates from your office signed by you
I know.
for being teachers.
That's because nobody wrote my mother a letter as a teacher.
And that letter of appreciation many of us have preserved to show our children because you're such a role model. To
That
us.
was from the teacher's child who became minister, who knows that the teacher's job is never appreciated.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Jessie Rock.
It's very surreal to be called ma'am by teachers. Yes.
I'm from GD Public School, Chandrapur, Maharashtra.
अरे मराठी असतात का?
Yes.
नाव काय तुमचं?
मी महाराष्ट्रीयन नाही आहे.
अरे पण हां बोलू शकते. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, it's an out-of-the-box question. See here.
Nothing which was asked right now was in the box. Huh?
This occasion is mainly for the educators
Yes.
to recognize, praise the educators. And in your speech also, it was very clear that you have deep respect for the teachers.
Yes.
But presently what we find is, students' rights, that is more than the...
नाही स्पष्ट सांगा मला.
See, ma'am, मुलांचे आहे ना हक्क खूप वाढलेला आहे.
हो.
पण शिक्षकांचे आहे ना ते
हक वाढलं नाही.
नाही वाढलेले नाही आहे, पण ते शिक्षक आहे ना एकदम ओपनली करायला त्यांना किती वाटतं त्यांना.
Okay, so basically she's saying the rights of students have increased and not the rights of teachers to deal with difficult situations. That's a very... Okay. Oh. So
Can there be any upcoming law to protect
there is a law.
teachers' rights?
Ma'am, there is a law.
Okay.
We have no absence of law in our country. And I'm not here because not only am I somebody who served as the education minister, but I also had the privilege of writing the document called the New Education Policy, which will be implemented in India for the next at least 10 to 15 years. There is no absence, madam, of law for protecting the rights of individuals, and that includes teachers. But let me give you the gray area, right? We have an institution called the NCPCR. We do have cases where elders have played truant. And then we have cases where students have gone awry. it is not as though both those bad behaviors are the general norm. What you may find yourself constrained in is how parents and management reacts. Your pressure comes from society and something going viral, to you feeling constrained as to how to deal with an errant child. Your genius is in finding how to do everything while preserving your dignity and your sanity. Let me give an instance. There was an experiment done in a prison where a lady went amongst male prisoners, made them stand in a circle, and said, I will ask a few questions, and those who respond yes should come into the circle one step at a time. The first question was, how many of you were raised, and she's asking hardcore criminals, were raised by a single parent? One step in. How many of you were with an alcoholic parent? They step in further. How many of you have been sexually abused by somebody? They take the third step. So when we get somebody who's emotionally broken and their only response is violence or misbehavior, we need to see that as a sign of, does that child need help? If it is somebody who is rich and arrogant, it's a different story altogether. Then you have to take it up with the management and find new strategies to deal with it. But if it is somebody from the middle class, from the lower middle class, from a poor family, they may be in bigger trouble, and their temperament may be just a manifestation of their need for help. And that is why I said the difficult thing to be is a teacher who's compassionate and passionate. If you start looking at bad behavior from that lens, you may reach a different conclusion. And then you will know how dealing with those parents are absolutely different objectives and strategies. So not all teachers are bad, and not all students are troublesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.